Everyone, welcome. This is the GTM AI podcast. Joining me today is the co-founder of Spiky AI, Burak Aksar, who dives into AI with revenue intelligence. This is sponsored by the GTM AI Academy, your go-to source for learning how to use AI in companies, teams, and in your individual workflow. Business impact over learning tools.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. This is Coach K with the GTM AI podcast. I am here with the man from Spiky AI. If any of you have a meeting with me, you would have seen the lovely little bot from Spiky following me around. And I just so happen to have the man, one of the co-founders, and I believe the software engineer behind the magic of Spiky, which is Burak Aksar. Welcome, and so good to have you.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate the opportunity here. And I'm so excited to chat with you. I've been following the podcast for a while, and thanks for, again, the opportunity. Yeah. Should I start with an intro, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, let's do it. So obviously you're in part of the communities I'm in. You're in Rev Genius, you're in Sales Enablement Collective. But what I would love is the stuff that's not on LinkedIn. So I'd love to hear more about like your own journey of what you were doing before and what kind of led you to what you're doing now, and kind of give people an idea of that side of you.
Yeah, absolutely. We all curious about what doesn't exist in our social media. And hopefully we're going to have a lot of time to discuss what doesn't exist on where people can see. But
Yeah.
hi everyone again. I'm Burak Aksar, the co-founder and software engineer at Spiky. So actually, I'm not coming from any type of go-to-market, sales, or marketing type of a background. My journey into the world of AI has begun like close to 10 years ago with my academic pursuits. I got my PhD in machine learning. I was at Boston University. This strong foundation has been actually instrumental in shaping my career and my passion for AI. So over the years, again, like I'm purely technical. So I don't have any like fancy GTM titles or something like that. And we realized
okay.
that actually, there's a big data problem here. I worked at some top companies like IBM AI Research, Sandia National Labs. I was involved basically building end-to-end AI solutions for like highly challenging problems like optimizing the performance problems in supercomputers. And these experiences basically given me a deep understanding of the practical applications and transformation potential of AI. So that's basically how I got into this field. And then we realized that there's a huge problem in the go-to-market space, which can be solved with AI. But since everyone is talking about AI nowadays, so that's basically how I ended up here. So basically, that's a quick intro. But yeah.
Love it, man. I also love an outside point of view. Like I'm a big fan of that. And so I might be asking you some more kind of tech specific nerdy questions, because obviously you know more than I do, and I'm going to tap in a little bit. But what I would love to know is, of all the tools out there, like what category would you put Spiky? Because I always call it like an AI conversation intelligence tool, but I don't know if that's how you describe it. So how would you describe it?
I think conversational intelligence is a fair point, but what we try to say is like revenue intelligence, because conversations are kind of part of the revenue for sure. But the revenue is like right now, it's a very multifaceted problem, and I would say multiple teams are included and multiple data sources are included, because right now revenue is composed of sales for sure, but also customer success, customer support, even product teams and the engineering teams. Let's say you're trying to upsell a product. If your engineering team or if your product team are not included, you won't be able to sell it. So the revenue, that's why we call Spike in the revenue intelligence domain, because I think the revenue domain is, I think there's like really good advancements, but the problem is the data component of the revenue domain is broken because there's a huge data challenge, which we come in a point. But that's where I would put Spiky, the revenue intelligence.
So inside of it, like I've been in enablement, which means I've worked with a lot of, I guess I'll just call them conversation intelligence, revenue intelligence tools, Gong, SalesLoft, Kaya, Chorus, you name it. I've probably used it and then some. And then when all the AI stuff started coming out, I used Fathom, Fireflies, Otter, like all the tools. And now I have Spiky following me everywhere. So I can admittedly say that the stuff I'm getting from Spiky is way above and beyond what I'm getting from any other, at least free call recording tools, but it's beyond that because I'm using it as a solo user. But for teams, it's a much different thing, which I'd love to have you tap into for in a second. But before I do, let me ask you this. With all those other tools out there, whether the free Fathoms on the other side of the spectrum of Gong, why this and what makes Spiky different?
So that's a pretty good point. And I think every tool that you mentioned, they have their own advantages, which is very normal. So for example, I would definitely classify this into two different brackets, like the competition bracket. Let's say the legacy tools, Gong, Sales Law, of course, they basically educated the market. They started this change. They started like a behavior change, I would say.
Mhm.
And I think those type of legacy tools are pretty good. They're giving like comprehensive output on the organizational component. Like
Yeah.
you can do a lot of stuff with those legacy tools right now. You can do forecasting, you can track your teams or create small clips or coaching snippets across your team. So there's a lot of stuff to do. But generally they're very, I would say, generalistic as well. And they're trying to do everything. And the missing component we are trying to pair in those type of legacy software is the automation, or I would say automated insight component, because the revenue domain is already very complicated, and I think no one has figured out yet, including us, like what are some winning behaviors and how do I basically apply this at scale? So that's a big data problem there. Like you got to track people, whether they're applying the best practices. It's not just keyword tracking. It can't be keyword tracking. There is like also emotional component in those type of conversational discussions happening with your customers. So that's why
Mhm.
Spiky is sitting basically, we can sit on top of those tools, but still the biggest component we're after is basically providing these non-conversational cues and tying that into outcomes or actions. So that's
Mhm.
basically what we're after. And the second generation stuff, I would say more note taking or like basic collaboration functionality, or they're more in the productivity space. Students can use it, teachers can use it, and everyone should use it nowadays because I think that's a mundane task that you can automate it, right? Hey, this is the transcript, this is some talking points. However, the problem and the solution are different there. So what we realized is, I think before note taken, when we first started building like Spiky, what we realized is,
Yeah.
hey, Spiky is super cool for us because we were doing a lot of customer interviews and we were using like our own tool to generate insights because I want to find out what resonates with the people, right? And
Mhm.
note taking was hard, but that wasn't the real problem. Then what we realized is, hey, I have all the notes. Then what am I gonna do with this? Like the same thing. If I give you thousands of transcripts right now, companies are facing the same problem. Okay, what's next? I have all the transcripts. I have all the recordings. So that's
Right.
why I think the recording domain is also lack of intelligence component because there's no actionable outcomes tied into the recordings you have. So that's why I think it's creating, I think just I don't know, huge data lake, but you're limited with, again, hey, what am I going to do? I have limited time. Someone has to figure it out for me. So that's probably what I would
Yeah.
say, like two different aspects of the competition. And where we sit is basically, hey, you have data siloed across teams, across different sources. Let us help you to generate something actionable, which will tell the next best step and which will tell you how it's going to tie it into a revenue outcome. So that's basically where we fit in the competition.
Yeah, I love that because like I said before the podcast, like the podcast itself and the academy is all about how in the heck to use AI to actually make some business outcomes and results and impact. Because otherwise, having tools just to have tools is fun, but last thing we need is more tools just to have tools, and especially in the so. Quick question for you on this is, being a user of Gong and Chorus and others, which are definitely nicer tools to have for a lot of different reasons. But like you said, you have this massive amount of content. You're like, how in the heck, what am I supposed to do with this? But what I've loved about Spiky is the feedback on the things that's beyond the words that I don't think gets talked about enough. Like the first introduction I ever had to an AI tool was one that was custom built from a guy in India, that it was all about Zoom recordings and doing facial recognition and voice recognition and all the stuff that was beyond transcript. It blew my mind that
Yeah,
a tech could do like that. Was my first thing. It was just like I just was changed forevermore after that conversation.
absolutely. I think that's a very
Um,
important point there. Yeah,
Yeah, but to yours, I'd love to hear more, a little bit more about the tech. Like most
sure.
people are familiar with a Fathom or a Gong that just records transcripts. But what is your tool doing differently as far as the intent or the tone of voice? Like what is it doing a little bit different?
So right now we are measuring like close to, I would say 60 different metrics per second granularity. And when I say metrics,
Okay, yeah,
this is basically ranging from vocal metrics and going into like visual or facial metrics. So let's say, hey, your customer got excited or got started like talking much more energetic when you start talking about this certain feature.
yeah,
Or maybe like the engagement was very low in this specific section compared to the
uh-huh,
past part of the meeting. Maybe you start like putting up the pricing information immediately. So people were like, hey, we're trying to solve a problem here. And you start like discussing about the budget, pricing, whatever. So all those like non-conversational cues up to, again, 60 different metrics measuring vocal stuff, language stuff, visual stuff, as well as contextual stuff. We are trying to tie it into the outcomes there. So like the transcription is again like just one thing. But at the end of the day, I think even though AI gonna take over, I think that type of a thing is something that is really hard to mimic or hard to replace. So that's why the non-conversational metrics we are generating are basically trying to give people insights about, hey, you've been talking too much, people are not paying attention,
Yeah.
or you gotta talk about this topic, but you're not doing anything about it. So we wanna just basically be on top of their virtual, like, we wanna be their virtual friends and giving them like more, hey, like read the room, understand the prospect. And some people are like great at soft skills or understanding other people, but most of us
Right.
not. If I can
Yeah.
figure out and help you, and if this is also tied into the revenue, you guys go and scale this. So that's basically like what we build Spiky on top of it. We have like close to 30 different proprietary models measuring all the metrics that I mentioned, starting from like vocal metrics, language metrics, and contextual stuff, and trying to tie these metrics into the outcomes or revenue outcomes.
Do you now? I'm gonna get a little nerdy because this is kind of stuff I love to dive into because I'm a data guy.
Yeah.
So, do you find like when you've started to measure some of these metrics, have you found like I'll give you the example. Like when Gong once upon a time posted about how email velocity is directly attached to win rates and how deals with higher win rates have this email velocity, right? Do you find metrics that were not measurable before but are now because of your tech are influencing things like that? You're saying, hey, we consistently see this thing is influencing win rates or something like that. You see that kind of thing
Absolutely.
pop up?
Yeah, yeah. Since we analyzed so far, I would say millions of hours of video, like interestingly in one of our customers. So keywords are one thing for sure. But what we realized is their sales team, for example, I also use that when I was speaking. I also use that example when I was speaking, but they were bringing up the pricing topic really early. They were doing like some sort of like a very long deal cycle SaaS product, but it was very enterprisey. And they were trying to basically penetrate from the top funnel, like
Right.
C-level executives or maybe a little bit behind that. They were like their account executives, whatever, they were bringing up the like pricing discussion very early. And those
Hmm.
people were literally turned off. So we were like seeing trends across all their meetings because like just one meeting analysis is already strong, but also what we take pride in is like finding out the trends. That's what I mean by the actionable insight, for example.
Right.
So we realized that so since they bring this pricing up like early in the first or second meeting when they're talking to them, people were kind of turned off. And it was like almost 80% of their customer conversations, they were doing the same mistake. And it wasn't about like your talking
Interesting.
time, your listening time, whatever, because we saw a very like highly variant talking time, for example, because in the qualification call, let's say
Yeah.
the most of the time you say, hey, in the qualification call, 60-70% of the time customer should talk because you're trying to qualify them. But the problem is, like, it depends. It seriously depends. There's like a personalization component which is missing. So this vocal energy changes, and people were like very turned off, or like they were like kind of hesitant about discussing further because they were trying to put this budget discussion so early when they're qualifying. Then they updated their qualification framework because people are not responding well. And then we
Mhm.
observe like very interesting trends across different customers around these type of non-conversational stuff. Even like the real-time coaching, we see like some people are like super interested in pitching the product rather than like understanding you. It's about again talking time maybe, but the problem there is how you manage that, how you navigate that. So there's like a lot of metrics that we are trying to publish, like some sort of a case study. Hopefully, we're gonna get it done like in next quarter. We're trying to collect some cool case studies across non-conversational, how non-conversational metrics basically impact some certain points in your revenue. So that's like what we are after for the next quarter. So we're trying to gather like much more data. But that's one interesting example that I found really fascinating across all the meetings we had.
I love that. I'm an ex. So once upon a time, I was a life coach, and one of the trainings I went through was body language training. And they've heard stats like I can't remember what the exact stats are, but something like the words you speak are 7 to 10%. The way you say it, the tone of voice is 30%. The other 50 to 60 is all body language. And so
Yeah,
the danger with just transcript is you lose 90% of what's being communicated because it's just the words. So having that, like having the metrics to measure, like you said, the unmeasurable, and then seeing the correlation between that and otherwise, because sometimes if you ever had a serious relationship, you always hear people say, "It's not what you said, it's how you said it." So
yeah,
that thing alone is hard to coach on because if all you have is the transcript, if that's all the AI understands, you're limited on a big part of what's being communicated.
absolutely.
Yeah. Curious then, you said proprietary models. I'm going to ask a tech question. Do you both
Mhm.
plug into OpenAI or Claude, or do you do your own stuff in your own AI models, or what's the back end look like?
So the backend look like a mixture of both. So depending on the domain and depending on the results we are generating, we use both. So it's basically a combination of closed source and open source models actually. So we have a lot
Cool.
of domain data, but we also build on top of the existing open source models because you don't need to reinvent the
Smart.
wheel, but there's definitely a domain advantage we are leveraging. So it's a combination of both. We have like a multi-model approach out there.
So I'm curious. I had an interesting experience actually on a call with Spiky on with me, and I wanted to share with you and just get your thoughts on it. So
Sure.
I was doing this call. We were prepping for a webinar, and there's several of the speakers. And I wasn't the only one with a call recorder. Like there's one with Fathom, another one from somebody else, and then mine from Spiky. And we're all, and the focus of the webinar was AI in marketing. And one of the speakers was uncomfortable with it because we were talking about AI and she knew about recorders. And I said, yeah, mine's awesome because it does this kind of tonality voice recognition thing. And she's like, what? Are you serious? And so she turned off her thing. She stopped talking and she was like, I'm uncomfortable that an AI is reading data that I didn't give permission to share or that I don't have. The only way for me to communicate in this meeting is by me talking, and then it's reading stuff about me that I don't know what it's reading, and I don't have permission to give that data. So I'm curious from a privacy viewpoint, how do you feel about that? Because I never thought about that until she brought up. I'm like, that's an interesting point. I've never thought about that.
I think everyone has their own point about this. Like our take is, or my take is, so if I put my like technical hat,
Yeah,
so let's say we are all using like these websites, you shop online, you put stuff on social media. So the privacy is a huge concern, but I think people have some sort of a specific turn off for these type of like recording because everyone is kind of scared. Hey, if this is recorded, someone can bring this up and use against me,
right.
right? But then those people go and like shop online or post something online or like in social media. So it's pretty much the same. And actually, I would say like the social media stuff is much more dangerous because their regulations, those big companies or their like data privacy rules, etc., they can literally sell everything. We are not
Yeah,
trying to make money out of this. So the main goal is basically helping you, and we're trying to be like compliant with SOC 2, like GDPR. There's like ISO certificates, etc. So we're trying to be compliant as much as we can. Whereas all this stuff that you feel comfortable is actually 10x worse. Like from technical standpoint, I have a lot of engineer friends who are working in the advertisement departments of big companies. I'm not going to name
right.
them probably, but
Yeah,
you would say they know a lot about you, and probably you never imagined they would know about this because they know your neighbors, they know your friends, they know everyone in your circle, what they buy, what they do, where they go, what was the mortgage price they were paying. So you can't imagine. So that's why I'm like about this topic, like your vocal or your voice, maybe, or your transcription would be the latest thing that you should be worrying about right now. Because I think our goal here is to help the end customer. And their goal is
yeah,
like basically, but it's all about marketing. I think the understanding is a bit different here. And people I think historically always kind of scared of recording. And that's why I think it was creating this type of impact, especially we see like a friction in Europe compared to US or other
yep,
countries.
yep,
Like GDPR was active there for the last 10 years or maybe more. I'm not sure. People are like very conservative about it and they're not taking risks. So I think it depends on the culture, depends on the domain, depends on what you are doing. So there's a lot of, I think, complications. My take is, I think most companies, like, they are trying to help you and their privacy statements, data statements are open and it should be open. And you can always ask to these companies. And like, from that point, we are trying to help people. We are not trying to, I would say, make profit out of their vocals or their discussion points or something like
right,
that.
right.
Not us, maybe the big guys, but not us for sure. So my take is, I think we should just get it over and make sure we are in a mindset that we can really utilize this technology to help us out without being in the responsible domain.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get it. I think what the biggest thing I'm hearing is it's the choice because that's all privacy is choice. What am I
It is.
choosing and not? Which the dangerous thing is, and what most people don't know is what social media companies do with all the data they get. That's what I think is the really dangerous part is that we don't know all the things they do. Whereas
Yeah.
with a tool like this, I think the difference is it's kind of like when we had call recorders come out in the first place with Zoom and everything else. First hearing the words, this call is being recorded, you're like, ugh, I don't know how I feel about this, but we're all like used to it now. And now we're getting to the point where AI can read everything about us. Do we choose into that, or do we not? Do we turn off the screen so you can't see my face, so you can only read my voice?
Yeah.
I think it's a different level because people just aren't used to the technology that your voice can be
Yeah.
analyzed and then spoken to. It's just a new thing. But
Yeah. I think the connotation is bad. Let me put it that way. Sorry that I cut you
yeah,
off, Jonathan. Like people were like, when the COVID hit, the online meetings or online exams, they were using like cheating inspectors or like some sort of proctoring tools. So I think
yeah,
that's how it fit into people's minds most of the time. So people like, hey, this is gonna judge me. So that
right.
judgmental component is, I think, kind of turn off for people. And immediately, if something is recorded, people are like, "Hey, if I say this, what if my manager comes and say, 'Hey, Brock, why did you say this?'" Yeah,
Right.
we always approach this question like, "Hey, this is your company culture. Seriously, if you're like in a company, in a company where people are kind of judging each other instead of helping, we're not
Hmm.
gonna help you because you're not gonna learn because no one will speak up, and then there will be nothing for us to analyze." And if your company culture is more like a proactive support or like helping each other and building on top of like the knowledge there, I think those are the companies winning. But if you have this like type of
Yeah.
closed company culture, like judging each other or like looking for mistakes all the time, so I don't think it's gonna help. And you say it might not fit your company culture, which is perfectly fine, but I think it's a company culture issue.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up because like I've seen this, it doesn't matter the tool, Gong, Chorus, whatever, like whatever call recorder tool it might be. The culture around it is huge because some people use it as a compliance mechanism. So like the only time anyone ever hears about their call recordings is when their manager says, "Hey, we got to talk about this call. You just totally bombed and failed in compliance," versus
Yeah,
saying, "Hey, this call, you had this thing happen. Let's talk about strategy of how we actually win." It's used in the positive sense versus the negative consequence sense. But the tool is the same in both scenarios. It's not the tool, it's the culture behind it, which I think is important to show.
totally fair. Yeah.
With, I'm curious with I told you this before, I'd love to hear more about the AI stack that you use. You're a co-founder, you're a software engineer, so I'm sure you probably use different stuff. Like, what are you using on a day-to-day basis besides Spiky to do your workflow?
So is it more like a company-wide stuff? Are you asking more like a company-based or like GTM stack type of a thing, or
Both.
like more like a
Both. Yeah,
or
both you as an
product or technical
individual and then your
perspective?
team.
Yeah. So we definitely use like some APIs across like the closed source and open API cloud type of stuff to
Mhm.
optimize our internal processes because we have templates that we're generating for the features, for example.
Yeah.
Mainly like doing like product and engineering work there. We use Copilot in the when we are coding or our engineers are coding because I think that's very helpful overall, especially like it helped a lot of the junior developers caught up with their senior developers. So those are like some productivity tools we are using. We use
Yeah.
this GitHub Copilot, and also we are like in POCs with a couple of small startups, like where they are like helping us in terms of documentation. We have like huge repos. Hey, we can take this data, private data, feed into some sort of large language model, generate some sort of an instructions because readmes have to be updated or otherwise they are like constantly
Forever.
outdated and people cannot update. So we are using a lot of like productivity stuff across the product as well as the engineering team. Some like stuff you're using, like we're definitely tracking who are like interested in our website, our like social media content. We are doing a lot of tracking across those type of metrics and our people because I think the whole, I would say, goal in the current GTM space is like being fast is super important because people have a very short attention span, same as
Mhm.
like the buying process. If you miss them, else will reach out. So we're trying to be as fast as we can there. But I think overall in our day-to-day implementations, the productivity tools we are using or some engineering tools or co-pilot tools, as well as like we generated, for example, internally some social media guidance stuff and like small chatbots. Hey, this is like Brock's knowledge. So this is like what I do when I'm like, let's say posting, this is how I answer,
Right.
this is how I write. And I use that for training junior people. So those are like some, I would say some AI stack we're using like in our day-to-day operations. I don't know. Those are some stuff that popped up my mind when we were speaking.
Love it. And for you personally, all those tools, like anything that uniquely you do use as a co-founder, like by yourself, like whatever tool that might be?
So I'm a very, I would say, lean co-founder in terms of tools and stacks. They might be very
Yeah.
interesting, but I like the fact that being very plain, lean startups. I think I'm a huge fan of it. So personally, are you asking like a tool name or something, or more like
Yeah, like,
a
I don't know if you use anything like you use specifically for you, but, like, anything at all. Just curious.
For myself, I have trained, I'm basically feeding all the social media content that I'm generating to keep myself up to date and like generating new stuff and like generating ideas about what to talk next based on historical data. So I train
Cool.
like local agents and I'm like basically trying to figure out, I'm collecting data from internet, but also I'm collecting data from like my own writing. So I have like small agents that I'm using for the future posts, future ideas that I'm like kind of training my own social media agent because I'm trying to be like speak up
Cool.
on the social media as much as I can. So that's basically one agent that I created and using myself across all the posts that I like, stuff that I posted and people that I really like their language. So I'm trying to learn from them. So that's what I do like daily or at least bi-daily personally.
No, I love that, man. I'm always curious to see when people are in the AI space, what do you actually use on the back end for yourself? Because it's just,
Mm.
it gets to the nitty gritty, which is fun. Well, let's kind of end this with to talk about AI in general with business. And again, I love your point of view because you've been in the AI space, but not necessarily in the go-to-market space. So I'm curious now that you're in it, and I know 6 months to a year in the AI world is like light years, but what are you excited about? What do you see coming down the pipe that will drastically change teams
Mm.
or
I mean,
companies?
yeah, that's a great point because I think I'm bringing a different perspective because I'm bringing an engineering perspective to this field.
Yeah.
So all the leaders we've been chatting and they're pure GTM leaders. Their perspectives are completely different compared to our perspective or my specific perspective, which is a good thing and also a bad thing because when you pitch the investors, investor will say, "Hey, there's no business guy. What's up with
Yeah.
that?" But I think what we're after is like a big data problem here. So I would say I'll start with the one negative component. What I see in all the GTM teams, I think there's a over reliance on technology. So what I mean by this is people like rely on technology without understanding it properly or
Yeah.
without having the right integrations. So let's say every company that we're talking to, oh, AI, I want to use this. But the problem that I'm seeing is they don't know actually. Like they don't know what they really want to update. So generally what
Right.
I like suggest them is, or hey, bring your decision makers, bring your thought leaders, whoever you want, and let's have a couple of objectives here. Because most of the time they know the problem, but they're like kind of afraid to speak up or they're like, hey, I don't have a budget, whatever. So we always try to give them some sort of talking points. Hey, maybe as a CS leader, your main goal is to prevent churn or do an
Yeah.
upsell. And I really love doing a deep dive with those type of people. And I think generally in those sessions, what I see is fascinating. Like because if you don't do this, like properly understanding, maybe AI not is the solution because they're like traditional machine learning algorithms. Let's say random forest. It might solve all of your churn problems. Maybe you don't even need a machine learning. Maybe just traditional data science will help you a lot, like with
Yeah.
almost zero cost. But everyone is, hey, large language model, let me train my own company data. And so for what? I think the problem that I'm seeing is over reliance on technology is really bad because I mean, it's so hard to make this secure. It's so hard to make this very accurate. It's not transparent most of the time. And people
Mhm.
just you don't have like, I don't know, not every company has 10 data scientists or 10 AI engineers. And I don't think you should
Right.
accommodate that. So I think the point that I'm trying to make is I'm really excited, like all the advancements here, but properly understanding is the key here. If you don't understand, I don't think you can optimize any process. It doesn't need to be revenue. But the things that I'm like really excited, if I flip the page a bit, I think like we've been expecting this, but the large language models are becoming a commodity. I was like, I don't know, maybe 2 days back, I was investigating the number of GPUs ordered like last year. For sure, Meta and OpenAI, they are leading that process. The other companies are also coming, but there's a 4x difference in terms of the number of orders. So I think the underlying foundation is going to become much more accessible, much more cheaper.
Yep.
It's gonna help building, let's say, products, building as fast as we can. So these are good stuff. And that's why I think maybe the note-taking component became too, I don't know, popular. There are probably 300, 400 tools right now around there. But this is very exciting. But the things that I'm like looking forward to, especially from technical standpoint, there's like still a lot of problems across, let's say, knowledge graphs or like
Yeah.
basically making sure you can approach this revenue problem or company data problem at a large scale. It's very accurate. There's tons of technical challenges we need to solve. LLMs are just one part of it. People are talking about RAGs, other retrieval methodologies, as well as knowledge graphs. So we have to tell these large guys, hey, this is what I care. This is like how I operate. So I need to give them the connections, because these unique connections, I think, gonna make a huge change. But there are a lot of challenges to solve in this type of a big data problem. But I'm looking forward to much more accessible, scalable. And one more point before I end it. Yes, scalable and accessible, but also the explainable component, or I would say
Hmm.
transparency. So the ethics in AI is a big thing. I also like worked a bit about explainability during my PhD, but especially with the large language models, you see all those hallucinations, you see all those like ridiculous answers, especially for crucial domains. We have to find a way to regulate these, because you are trying to regulate human beings, right? In terms of compliancy, let's say you have to say certain things in certain domains, maybe insurance. But how are we going to regulate these type of large language models? How are we going to make sure we can put a limit there? I
Hmm.
think making these ethically successful is a very big challenge, because let me make an analogy here. Even explaining one decision tree or random forest is super hard. Like, it doesn't make sense to humans. It's more like a feature explanation. However, like large language model, it has been trained on billions of, let's say, tokens across the web, and it's the reasoning component is missing there. So as a human being, you can tell me why you said this specifically. And from a large language model perspective, it's more like a predicting the future type of stuff.
Right.
Since I see these sentences or these words are coming after certain stuff, that's my this prediction. But this is not reasoning. This is just like how you trained on. So I think we gotta make
Right.
this much more scalable. We still have time, but I think those stuff are definitely making me super excited, and I'm like excited to see their implications on the real world problems.
I was going to actually ask you about your PhD because I saw on your LinkedIn, I was going to ask you about it. But I think to your point, though, that's part of where the challenge is that people want to have AI product to be sexy or to make sure they have something new to market or relevant or whatever. And to your point, it's okay. You gotta have some foundational pieces in place before you can slap on some sort of AI tech to make it so it's better. Before we go though, I would love to hear more about your PhD. What was your thesis on, and how are you using it now?
Yeah, so I basically developed these end-to-end AI frameworks to detect and diagnose performance problems in large-scale computing systems. Imagine like supercomputers, right? So these systems are super large. When I say large computing, I'm mentioning like millions of CPUs or GPUs. So the
Right.
problem is these systems are very distributed. Let's say each of them has 10,000, 20,000 of nodes, and they're capable of doing like quintillion, like 10 to the 18 operations per second. The problem here is you can't waste the energy here. You can't let your machine, let's say machine learning model sit and train data 10 more minutes or maybe an hour more, right? So the biggest problem there is hey, seems like this compute node is kind of off. It's consuming more energy, or there's a memory leakage problem certainly in that application. So we were trying to find those performance problems which causes waste of money, energy, and we were trying to find those automatically and telling the user, hey, these are certain problems we detected here. It could be because of XYZ reasons. So we were trying to also explain those decisions. And we were doing this with millions of time series data, processing that information in real time, and providing like feedback to system admins. So we were helping admins to monitor their big machines and helping them to figure out what was problematic or what was wrong if we detect something. Hope that makes sense, and I'm not like
It
super
does.
like technical.
No, a little technical, but that's okay. So basically, what I'm hearing though is you could say you're kind of doing the same thing with GTM teams because you're showing the larger problems to admins of what's going on inside the organizations that they can't track otherwise. Like to me, I'm like, that's exactly what you're doing with Spiky. It's the exact same thing. It's crazy.
That is the right analogy. Yes, I was gonna
Yeah.
come to that, but exactly, pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I love it. I know we're wrapped up, so I'm gonna just wrap it up by just saying, fascinating talking to you. Like I could literally just have sit at your feet and just let you teach me about AI because I know I don't know as much as you do, but I love these conversations because I learn a ton. So thank you for that. Um,
Absolutely, my pleasure.
yeah, but what's the best way to get in touch with you? So obviously, Spiky SPIKY.ai is your domain. What's the best way to get in touch with you if people want to reach out to you?
LinkedIn is, I think, the best way, or they can always like send me an email. It's just my name at spiky.ai. So I'm happy
Cool.
to take this conversation into next level with them, and whatever they feedback, would love to chat more.
Love it, man. And I believe I have from your partner in crime, I think I have a demo in the GTM AI demos library. So if someone wants to see what you guys can do, have a demo that you guys can see, or just sign up yourself and use it because it's pretty freaking rad.
Absolutely, yes. It would be our pleasure, especially like we're right now looking for large scale teams because with our like new release features, we are like generating cool trends, I would say, across
Mhm.
their whole customer conversations. If they want to like, they are really interested in seeing what are some trends, what are some insights across all these conversations that I have. I would love to talk to them or like partner with them because we're launching this new big stuff in the upcoming months. And I would love to include them in our partnership or design partnership type of a thing.
Love it, man. I'm totally game. I'll make sure people know about it. That's awesome. So, Brock, thank you so much, man. Been a pleasure and honor. Like I said, learned a ton, and just want to tell you guys, thank you so much.
It's our pleasure, Jonathan. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you again. Really appreciate
Of
it.
course, you're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the GTM AI podcast. Please follow, subscribe, like, comment, and come back for more.